I'll be your master contraptionist for the next 20 minutes or so. If you don't have a ticket, last chance, wave your arm. We want to make sure everyone gets a chance to win. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our fabulous Gypsy rig. Well, we call her Florence, 23,000 pounds, thundering down the highway, a real castle built on the back of an FL-60 Freightliner, complete with a working water wheel on the back. 2 telescoping turrets, which gives us 2 upstairs bedrooms. The rear one we call the Pirate's Lounge, captain's quarters in the front, computer lab, changing room, living room, dining room with its own fireplace, kitchen with copper sink, refrigerator, generator, everything we need to live on the road for 7 to 9 months of the year. And because we like to have the highest seat in the house, we have our own mast and crow's nest. Yes, you can sit on the very top, the best views for the sunsets. Also, we're going to do a little blacksmithing for you. We need some tools for that. 2 of these. Now, these are called post or leg vices. They're both about 150 years old. They're unique to blacksmithing because of this leg that goes down the side to the floor. Now, that's there so that when we do the serious smashing, it transfers the energy to the floor so they can take more abuse than usual. We'll be using several different pairs of tongs, several different hammers, and the tool we're most known for, our anvil. Now, this anvil weighs an impressive 380 pounds. She was made in England about 1840. About 1860, they loaded her up on a wood sailboat, hauled her around the tip of South America up to San Francisco, then put her on a wagon, hauled her up to where we happen to hail from, Angels Camp, California, one of the original gold rush towns. It's about halfway between Tahoe and Yosemite, and that's where we found this anvil in one of the original mines. So this is actually one of the anvils that helped build the West. We're extra proud to put her back into use. And our final tool, our heat source. Now, we use a modern horseshoeing forge. Horseshoeing is alive and well and continues to advance the craft of smithing. So this is the latest, greatest in heating technology, powered by propane, set at a whopping 2,500 degrees, and very best of all, it just runs itself. But of course, in the days of old, they would use coal or charcoal, and a whole bunch of this front row right down here on the ground. We made liberal use of child labor up until just 100 years ago. So blacksmiths such as myself would have had a 5 or 6-year-old bellows boy. Now, that would have been the kid pumping the air into the fire for me. A 7 to 10-year-old fire tender. Now, his job was to keep track of the fire, keep track of the metal in the fire, and that freed me up so I could spend my time focusing on the smithing. And actually, the word smith comes from the word smite, to hit. And if you happen to smite the black metal, which is iron, then you're a black smiter or blacksmith, as I am. So how did I become a blacksmith? Well, I was born in Berlin, Germany in 1960. Went to far too many castles as a kid, visiting friends and relatives throughout Europe. And I swore that someday I was going to build a castle of my very own. Well, here we are. We had a happy ending to that tale. And as we say, there's only one thing better than having your own castle. And that's having a castle that'll do 60 miles an hour down the highway, so you just take it with you everywhere you want to go. Well, looks like she's ready, so without further ado, let's give a rousing cheer and some thunderous applause to world-class storyteller and my wife, Christy Horn.
Welcome, everybody. So while Michael's up here smashing and crashing away behind me, making California miners' candles for you, I'm going to take you back in time to the beginning of the gold rush. To the day in 1850 when John Sutter found that fancy yellow metal in Sutter Creek, started one of the world's biggest migrations. More than 300,000 people made their way here to the boondocks of the West Coast, just along the California and Oregon Trail alone. And on that long cross-country journey, 1,800 miles, on that long journey, only 2 people were paid on the wagon trains. We didn't have automobiles like today. Horsepower was pooping horses out the front of your wagon, believe it or not, 1,800 miles, 2 people paid on that trip. One was a guide who knew how to read the landmarks, because we didn't have roads and gas stations and maps like we do today. And the other guy, if you could coax him away from Missouri, where everybody was training up, as they say, a blacksmith. Now think of this as the original hardware store, where everything was made one piece at a time to your order. I know most people think of a blacksmith as a horseshoer, but that's the one realm of blacksmithing that's still alive and well today, because we never did figure a machine that sticks a horse in over there and spits him out over there with nice shiny shoes on the bottom of his feet. Still takes that personal touch. But in the old days, it was a sweaty man at an anvil, making everything the town needed, from needles and pins to sew your clothes, scissors to cut your hair, a plow to feed your family better, a sword to protect your family better, saws and axes to fell these big trees, and so on. The blacksmiths, they were kind of like the MacGyver of the day, yeah? And you needed MacGyver on that long journey to get you out here to California. Now, two guys that got out to California, one of the stories is about John Studebaker. Anybody hear the Studebaker automobiles? Yeah, those funny. Anybody have a Studebaker? Yeah. You can see him in a Muppet movie. Well, the Studebakers, John Studebaker, he was the third son of three sons. And his father was the master blacksmith. There was no way John Studebaker was going to inherit his father's blacksmith shop. And so, hearing about that yellow metal out in California, he made his way to McCullamy Hill and Placerville, where he worked as a blacksmith. He didn't seek the yellow metal, made more money than most of the miners. For at a time when gold was just $16 an ounce, John Studebaker had a line of people as long as his arm waiting for his wheelbarrows. He made Studebaker wheelbarrows and he got $10 a piece for them. It was $1 to have your pick re-swedged or made sharp again, yeah? You didn't grind metal away. Metal was way too expensive. At that time, in the California gold rush, most of the iron for the United States was coming from Russia and Sweden. More ships sank, bringing iron here to the New World than all the treasure boats combined. Now, in the belly of a ship from Glasgow, Scotland, another third son in the blacksmith line, Robert McLaren over there in Glasgow, heard about this gold rush here in California and Oregon Trail and all that. And so, in the belly of one of those many steamships that was coming across the Atlantic Ocean, Robert McLaren earned his passage in the belly of one of those steamships. In the belly of those steamships, a very well-appointed blacksmith shop for self-repair as he came along, yeah? All the way across the Atlantic Ocean he came, down around the Horn of South America through some of the most treacherous waters in all the world, and all the way up the coast to the mouth of the San Francisco Bay. Now, Robert, he wrote that he was up on deck when he arrived in the mouth of the San Francisco Bay, and it was twilight, and he wrote in his journal that he thought for certain he hadn't arrived at the mouth of the San Francisco Bay, but at the gates of Hades. For so many ships were arriving that the San Francisco Bay became like this gigantic boat parking lot. And so to make room for all the new steamships coming in every day, they started scuttling the ships, taking off the canvas and so, and then setting the ships on fire and sinking them down into the dark water of the San Francisco Bay. And Robert wrote so many ships were on fire and steaming and sinking and listing and bubbling down into the water that he thought for certain he had arrived not in California but at the gates of Hades itself. Well, when Robert arrived, he heard his ship was bound to be scuttled too. It already had served its purpose and was going to be made down into the dark waters. And so, being a thrifty Scotsman, Robert McLaren, he made arrangements to buy that ship, kit and caboodle, for a $20 gold piece. Pretty good deal even for a Scotsman. Then, he powered that ship all the way up the coast of California to the foot of what's now X Street in Eureka. He waited for a record high tide and then, whoa, ran the ship aground at the foot of X Street. Cut the front of the ship off, exposing the blacksmith shop and all the inner workings, and Eureka, the very first blacksmith shop in Eureka, California, making all the tools, hardware, housewares, transportation, and weaponry of warfare for all of that little town for a while there. Now, in the old days, if you were my boy children, you started working in the blacksmith shop when you're 5 or 6 years old. Good news, you didn't have to go to school. Bad news, you didn't get to go to school. No matter what you wanted to be when you grew up, you were my slave labor. You were my retirement. We needed you to learn how to move this 2,300-degree Play-Doh around as quickly as we could. And believe it or not, parents, the apprenticeship program started at 5 or 6. At 5 or 6, you got to play with fire instead of going to school. You pump the bellows up high and down low and up fast and down slow, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. All that pumping up and down got my machines in shape. And we taught you how to be ambidextrous. That's a fancy way for saying if your right hand gets tired, switch hands. No going inside playing computer games, watching DVDs. You're all soft. By the time you're 9 or 10 years old, you start putting hammer to the anvil. And one of the first 2 things you'd learn how to make are chain and nails. A good nailer could make 1,000 nails a day. That's 1 nail every 40 seconds for 10 hours a day. Then, by the time you're 11 or 13 years old, we'd give you a promotion. We'd send you to the livery. You'd be the livery boy. You'd be the one in charge of shoeing the horses, shoveling the horse poop, running errands for all that sort of thing. To give you an idea of why, remember, swedging a pick one side, $1. Shoeing horses in 1850, 14 cents. They're closer to the ground. Let them do that work, yeah? Then if this doesn't sound like it's a mean enough life for you, by the time you were 16 years old, then we'd get particularly nasty and we'd get you married. Find you a wife, get you start building up your own labor pool, because by the time you're 18 to 20 years old, you had to be sufficiently skilled that you could take over for your dad. The reason for that, we use coal as our heat source in the old days, gets up into the air as dust, down into your lungs, your body can't get rid of it. So blacksmiths of old died around 35 or 40 of what we call black lung or miner's cough. Very short life, but everybody needed you. From the good mothers in the Shire needing scissors and needles and pins and ladles and pots and pans, all the way out to the gold miners, the lumbermen, even the fishermen. They needed the blacksmiths for their big hooks and all that, so on, yeah? Well, I'm going to close by telling you the 4 best things about blacksmithing, which is all about being... Am I ready? Candlesticks, all right. So what he's doing right now is finishing up the miners' candles. Now, in the old days, during the California Gold Rush, these were the most popular miners' candle during the California Gold Rush. But there's a miners' candles collector's guide. It's about this thick, because all the blacksmiths, they came up with their own version. Some hung on your hat. Now these, they stuck in the wall, but you didn't hammer them and leave them there. This was like the world's first flashlight, yeah? So you took it into the mine, you stuck it in the wall where you were working last, and then you pull it out, stick it in your hat, and it gets you back out of the mine, yeah? So these are the California miners' candle, most popular during the California Gold Rush. Expedience was king back then. And I'm going to close by telling you the 4 best things about blacksmithing, which is all about being a big giant kid trapped in a grown-up's body, which we hope you all are. Never grow up on the inside, no matter what gravity wreaks on the outside, yeah? Try to resist. Number 1, we get to mash on things with a hammer all day long, get our aggressions out. Number 2, we get filthy, dirty, and nobody minds. It's a good thing, because I married Mr. Dirt Magnet up here. Number 3, we get to be as loud and obnoxious as we want. No one's brave enough to tell us to be quiet. And the 4th and best thing, we get to officially play with fire. It's all the things you get in trouble for when you're 10, huh? And that is the end of these tales.